as America is facing a crisis that many don't want to talk about. Behind the glitz of Silicon Valley, the skyline of New York City, and the suburban ideal sold in television commercials, there is a painful reality spreading across the country. In city after city, in state after state, tents are going up where homes once stood. Job centers are disappearing. The middle class is shrinking, and millions of Americans are being pushed out of society into homelessness, hunger, and hopelessness. This is not just a story of inequality. It's a story of systemic collapse. Across the United States, as some states are deteriorating faster than others under the crushing weight of poverty, housing shortages, addiction, unemployment, and broken policy. In this documentary, we break down the top 10 states that are collapsing the fastest due to the poverty and homelessness crisis. This is not fiction. This is America in 2025. Let's begin in California. Once known as the Golden State, as California now has the largest homeless population in the United States. From Los Angeles to San Francisco, as entire blocks are filled with makeshift shelters. More than 180,000 people are unhoused in the state, and that number continues to climb. Despite being the fifth largest economy in the world, California is failing to provide affordable housing, mental health care, and sustainable opportunities for its lowest income residents. Tech wealth dominates the Bay Area, but just steps away from billion-dollar office buildings are families living in tents and cars. High taxes, rising rent, and complex zoning laws make it nearly impossible to build new affordable housing fast enough to meet the demand, as the crisis has reached such a level that even middle-class workers, teachers, nurses, and city employees are struggling to afford a place to live. Next is New York. The Empire State is not immune to the unraveling happening in urban America. New York City alone has over 100,000 people in its shelter system, the highest on record. Rent in many boroughs has skyrocketed, with entire neighborhoods becoming unaffordable for the working class. Outside the city, as rural poverty is gripping upstate communities that were once supported by industry, factories are gone, coal towns are hollowed out, and social services are stretched thin. In a state that was once seen as the gateway to opportunity, as opportunity now feels more like a luxury than a right. Then there's Oregon, a state where homelessness has exploded, especially in Portland. What started as a manageable problem has turned into a humanitarian crisis. Entire camps line freeways, sidewalks, and downtown parks. The cost of housing has soared, drug addiction is rampant, and law enforcement struggles to maintain basic order. Mental health resources are underfunded and understaffed, as the state recently decriminalized small drug possession to try to ease the burden on the legal system, but without proper rehabilitation programs, many argue it's only made things worse. Washington State is following a similar trajectory. Seattle, once a model of West Coast prosperity, now faces a visible and worsening homelessness problem. Encampments exist within sight of multi-million-dollar homes and tech headquarters. The economic divide is glaring. People who work full-time can't afford housing. Meanwhile, as skyrocketing healthcare costs and the opioid crisis have left thousands of people on the brink, living paycheck to paycheck, or already on the street. Hawaii might seem like paradise, but it has one of the highest rates of homelessness per capita in the country. Tourists enjoy 5-star hotels and beaches, while just blocks away, locals live in tents or overcrowded shelters. The high cost of living, from groceries to rent, has pushed many native Hawaiians and working-class families into poverty. Despite state programs and federal assistance, many say the crisis is only deepening as entire communities are being forced off the islands due to unaffordable living conditions. Let's talk about Louisiana. It may not make the headlines as often, but Louisiana has long struggled with deep-rooted poverty, as rural areas are suffering from decades of underinvestment, failing schools, and a lack of health care. In cities like New Orleans and Baton Rouge, As homelessness is growing, especially among families and veterans, the state has one of the highest child poverty rates in America, and wages remain low across industries. With climate change causing more frequent hurricanes and floods, entire neighborhoods are being displaced, with nowhere to go and no means to recover. Next on the list is Mississippi. It ranks near the bottom in nearly every socioeconomic category: education, healthcare, income, and housing. In some communities, basic infrastructure like clean water, internet, and even reliable electricity are still problems in 2025. Generational poverty is the norm, not the exception. There are areas in Mississippi where opportunity simply does not exist, where the American dream is a story people hear about but never experience. Arizona has also been spiraling in recent years. The cost of housing in cities like Phoenix and Tucson has surged beyond what many residents can afford. Evictions are rising, and the desert heat makes homelessness not just difficult, but deadly. As shelters reach capacity, as more people are forced to live outdoors in triple-digit temperatures. Meanwhile, addiction and mental health crises are stretching the limits of what the state's social services can handle. Nevada is in crisis mode as well, as Las Vegas is often seen as a playground for the rich and a hub for entertainment. But beyond the Strip, poverty is widespread. The city has a growing number of people living in storm drains and underground tunnels. In the shadows of neon lights and luxury resorts, thousands of people are barely surviving. Casino closures during the pandemic era hit working-class jobs hard, and the service industry hasn't fully recovered. Nevada now faces a crushing combination of economic instability, housing shortages, and mental health neglect. Finally, we come to West Virginia, a state that symbolizes the collapse of the American working class. Once powered by coal, West Virginia has seen its economic base crumble. With industries gone, many small towns have simply vanished. The opioid crisis has ravaged communities, and homelessness has become more visible even in rural areas. Hospitals are closing, schools are underfunded, and young people are leaving in search of opportunity elsewhere. Those who stay are often trapped in a cycle of poverty, addiction, and declining health. What's happening in these states is not just individual failure, it's systemic. It's the result of decades of economic policy that prioritized profit over people, of healthcare and education systems that leave the most vulnerable behind, of a housing market that treats homes like investments instead of basic human needs. This crisis touches every part of American life. It's about dignity, it's about survival, and it's about whether a nation that once promised opportunity for all can still live up to that idea. The federal safety net has shrunk. Affordable housing construction is not keeping pace. Mental health facilities are closing faster than they're opening. And wages, for many, have stagnated even as inflation eats away at every dollar. Local governments are overwhelmed. Non-profits are overworked. And communities are increasingly divided over how to respond. Some advocate for tougher laws to remove homeless camps. Others call for more housing-first policies. But so far, no one has found a silver bullet. If we don't act now, this crisis won't stay confined to these 10 states. It will spread. In many ways, it already is. The economic divide is growing, the middle class is shrinking, and millions of Americans are being left behind. This is a wake-up call, not just for politicians or economists, but for all of us. The collapse is not coming. It's already happening. As America confronts this unraveling, it's not just about numbers or data points. It's about real people. It's the mother in Mississippi working 2 jobs, but still unable to afford rent. It's the teenager in Oregon bouncing between shelters, trying to stay in school. It's the war veteran in California, sleeping under a freeway overpass, as haunted by trauma and forgotten by the system that promised to support him. Across these collapsing states, a common pattern is emerging. Housing is no longer a guarantee. even for those with jobs. In some of these states, the rental market has become entirely detached from reality. A one-bedroom apartment can cost more than an entire paycheck. Developers focus on luxury high-rises while public housing projects decay. The social contract, the idea that hard work equals stability, is broken. Healthcare plays a massive role in this crisis too. In states like West Virginia and Louisiana, entire counties lack access to hospitals, as mental health support is nearly non-existent in many rural and urban areas alike. Without adequate treatment, as thousands of people suffering from PTSD, schizophrenia, bipolar disorder, and addiction are forced to survive on the streets, in shelters, or in and out of jail cells. Addiction is another painful thread running through these states. The opioid epidemic has gutted communities across Appalachia and the Deep South. Fentanyl deaths continue to rise, as treatment programs are limited, underfunded, or inaccessible. And for every person who overdoses, there are many more silently suffering, with few places to turn. Education, once seen as the great equalizer, is failing millions. Underfunded schools in Mississippi, Louisiana, and West Virginia can't provide the same opportunities found in wealthier areas. Crumbling facilities, teacher shortages, and outdated materials create a system where poverty becomes generational. Children growing up in homelessness or unstable housing are far less likely to graduate, as far less likely to rise above the conditions they were born into. The criminal justice system adds another layer to this collapse. In many of these states, poverty is criminalized. Being homeless is treated as a public nuisance rather than a humanitarian emergency. People are arrested for sleeping in parks, loitering near businesses, or simply existing in public spaces. Once they have a record, the chances of finding work or housing shrink even more. It becomes a vicious cycle, poverty leading to homelessness, homelessness leading to incarceration, incarceration leading right back to poverty. Even basic infrastructure in these states is deteriorating. In Jackson, Mississippi, residents have gone without clean drinking water for weeks. In parts of Louisiana, as flood protection systems remain dangerously outdated. In California, wildfires destroy entire towns while power companies cut off electricity to prevent lawsuits. The systems that hold society together, water, electricity, transportation, communication, are showing signs of strain. And while the wealthy live behind gates and glass towers, as shielded from this collapse, everyday Americans are left to fight for scraps. In Nevada, people live underground to escape the heat. In Hawaii, families are leaving their ancestral lands because rent is simply too high. In New York, families sleep in their cars while Wall Street celebrates record profits. This is not just a crisis of economics, it's a moral crisis, as a test of whether the wealthiest nation on earth is willing to care for its own. A society cannot survive when large parts of its population are abandoned. When teachers can't afford homes, when veterans go hungry, when children sleep on sidewalks, that is not stability. That is collapse. And yet, it doesn't have to be this way, as experts and advocates across the country are calling for practical solutions. Universal housing programs, guaranteed income trials, mental health infrastructure, and education reform. Some cities have experimented with tiny home villages, rent subsidies, and trauma-informed shelters, with some success. But without federal coordination and long-term investment, as the scale of the crisis dwarfs the scattered efforts to contain it, political will is often the missing piece. As homelessness and poverty are not popular topics on the campaign trail, they are uncomfortable truths that many leaders would rather ignore, but ignoring them only ensures the problem worsens. Voters must demand more. Communities must organize, not just to provide temporary relief, but to force real, structural change. As the stories coming out of these 10 states are warning signs, flashing red alerts for the rest of the country. Today it's California and Mississippi. Tomorrow it could be Florida, Texas, or even your hometown. No state is immune from the pressures of inequality, rising housing costs, and crumbling systems. The line between security and desperation is thinner than many people realize. As a country, we have a choice. We can continue down this road, a path where poverty spreads, homelessness becomes normalized, and the American dream fades into myth, or we can change course. We can treat housing as a human right. We can invest in people instead of prisons. We can build communities where dignity, not just survival, is possible. But that change starts with awareness, with facing the truth. Because what's happening in these collapsing states is not someone else's problem. It's America's problem. And until we confront it, honestly, urgently, and compassionately, the collapse will continue, quietly in some places, loudly in others, but always with real lives on the line. This is not just a crisis of homelessness or poverty. It's a test of who we are as a nation, and time is running out. As we look toward the future, the biggest question remains, is it too late to reverse this collapse? As for many communities already on the brink, the challenges feel overwhelming. Cities are bankrupting themselves trying to provide basic shelter. States are fighting over budgets while federal funds dry up, and regular people, the ones most affected, are losing faith that help is ever coming. But there is still a window, a narrow, closing window to shift course. The United States has the resources, it has the talent, it has the technology. What it often lacks is the courage to act boldly, the will to prioritize people over profits, and the discipline to sustain long-term investment. As reversing this crisis requires more than just money, it demands a complete rethinking of how we define success and how we measure the health of a nation. First, we need a national housing strategy that is aggressive and unapologetic, as affordable housing must be treated not as a side issue or local problem, but as a federal emergency. The United States needs to build millions of new affordable homes, not luxury condos, not investment properties, but actual homes that working families, seniors, and veterans can afford. Rent control laws in some areas are a step in the right direction, yes, but they are not enough. Housing first models, which provide permanent homes with supportive services, have shown real promise. Cities like Houston have reduced chronic homelessness using this approach, but the programs need to be scaled up nationally. Second, as mental health and addiction treatment must be accessible, affordable, and destigmatized. Right now, too many people are ending up homeless because their illnesses go untreated. The lack of detox centers, therapists, and long-term support programs is contributing directly to the suffering we see on the streets. This is not just a medical issue, it is a moral issue. We must stop criminalizing mental illness and addiction and instead treat them as public health crises. That means restoring funding to community clinics, expanding Medicaid access, and building systems where getting help is easier than getting arrested. Third, wages must rise, and not just on paper. In states like Mississippi, Louisiana, and Arizona, the minimum wage is still far below what it takes to live even modestly. People working full-time jobs are living in shelters. That is unacceptable. A living wage adjusted for local cost of living, as should be a baseline standard. Along with that, stronger labor protections, job training programs, and employment pipelines must be built, especially for formerly incarcerated individuals, veterans, and young people aging out of foster care. Education must be overhauled. In many of the states collapsing fastest, public schools are falling apart, literally and figuratively. If we want to end generational poverty, education must be seen as a long-term investment, not a budget line to be trimmed. That means better teacher pay, safer school environments, and access to technology and modern materials. More importantly, schools must be connected to real-world opportunity through trade programs, apprenticeships, and mentorships that prepare students for economic self-sufficiency. Infrastructure, too, must be prioritized. You cannot talk about lifting people out of poverty if entire communities still lack clean water, functioning roads, and broadband internet. In West Virginia and rural Louisiana, infrastructure failure has cut people off from opportunity, literally and figuratively. Without access to the basics, families cannot apply for jobs, attend virtual school, or even drink safely from the tap. The federal government's infrastructure bill is a start, but again, execution matters. The money must reach the places that need it most, not just the loudest political voices. One of the biggest obstacles to progress is political will. In today's divided landscape, as homelessness and poverty are often politicized instead of solved, some leaders push tough on crime, crackdowns, as hoping to clear the streets without addressing root causes. Others push broad rhetoric, but fail to follow through with sustained funding and execution. What's needed is not ideology, but impact. We must stop asking whether solutions are liberal or conservative, and instead ask whether they work. At the local level, community solutions are proving effective in many areas. In California, some cities are experimenting with tiny home villages, mobile health clinics, and modular housing. In Oregon, volunteers are delivering food, hygiene supplies, and employment help directly to people on the streets. These efforts, while small, offer glimpses of what's possible when humanity leads policy. But without larger systems of support, they remain band aids on a broken bone. Technology can also play a role. Apps that help connect the homeless to shelter beds, AI systems that predict eviction risk before it happens, and non-profit data sharing platforms are already making an impact. But tech alone is not the answer. It must be paired with human compassion and serious investment. Faith communities, non-profits, and even business leaders are beginning to step into this space. Churches are opening their doors. Employers are hiring people who have lived through homelessness. Billionaires are funding housing startups. But again, as isolated efforts are not enough, what's needed is a national awakening. A moment where the country decides that letting people die on sidewalks is no longer acceptable. There are success stories. Finland, for example, has virtually ended homelessness by committing to housing, first policies, wraparound services, and real accountability. It proves this crisis is solvable if there is willpower. In America, we've solved bigger problems before: world wars, pandemics, recessions. We can solve this too. But it will take an entire country willing to look itself in the mirror. Because at its core, this isn't just a crisis about homelessness or poverty. It's a reflection of what we value. Do we value corporate profits more than child nutrition? Do we value luxury condos more than affordable housing? And do we value punishment more than redemption? Until we change what we reward as a society, we will keep watching cities collapse. So where do we go from here? We raise our voices. We vote for leaders who prioritize people. We hold officials accountable for broken promises. We support local efforts, donate when we can, and volunteer where it matters. We reject the myth that poverty is always a personal failure. We recognize the humanity in every person, housed or unhoused. Because the collapse we're witnessing is not inevitable. It's a choice to ignore or a choice to act. And for the tens of millions of Americans already living in crisis, every moment of inaction is another moment they're left behind. This is America in 2025. But it doesn't have to be America in 2030, as the clock is ticking. What we do next will decide which future we build.